We have done lots of top 10 and top 5 lists on this channel, but in this video I will be doing my first ever top 50 list, where I will recommend 50 excellent historical movies that most viewers of this channel may not be familiar with. And these are all excellent historical gems that everyone should watch at least once. But before we begin, don't forget, if you love anything to do with historical movies and historical TV shows, then subscribe to my channel, History Spark. At number 50, it is Silence, a passion project directed and produced by Martin Scorsese. This film is set in 17th century Japan, and it is a very difficult and turbulent time to be a Christian in the nation. And this is the backdrop in which two Jesuit priests find themselves sent to Japan to spread Christianity, but also to get an update on how priests are faring within the country as well. And with an all-star cast including Liam Neeson, Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, and with Martin Scorsese leading behind the camera, it still comes across as a huge surprise to me at just how few a number of people know about this film, as it is easily one of the most unique and engaging historical movies I have seen in a long time. At number 49, it is Flesh and Blood, a historical medieval adventure which tells the fictional story of a bride named Agnes who is captured by mercenaries, and a complex tale of revenge, love and brutality that follows as her husband Stephen tries to rescue her from her captors. This is a really oversimplified overview of the movie's plot, but Flesh and Blood is one of the most fascinating historical movies I have seen, and with an engaging plot with many unexpected plot twists and developments, and with some great acting as well by most of the cast, this is a film that is very easy to recommend. At number 48, it is Saladin the Victorious, a classic historical war film from 1963 which focuses on the legendary Muslim general and conqueror Saladin. This film focuses on the Third Crusade, in which Saladin has already conquered Jerusalem and the Christian armies are joining together to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslims. And this film offers a unique Muslim perspective from the Crusades which we do not often see depicted within many films. At number 47, it is Helen of Troy, a film based around the Trojan War, with it drawing most of its inspiration from the Iliad by Homer. This is a semi-decent portrayal of the Trojan War, and I really enjoyed it, as my expectations for this film were not particularly high, but it was much better than I was initially anticipating. It was also very cool to see some pretty famous actors like Stellan Skarsgård and John Rhys Davies in the film as well. The acting is decent, as the budget for Helen wasn't very big, so the emphasis here is more on storytelling rather than large battles and action scenes. Overall, I thought Helen of Troy was a good film, and if you can go in without comparing it too much to Troy, you will find an enjoyable ancient Greek adventure here for you. At number 46, it is Zulu, a classic historical film which depicts the Battle of Rorke's Drift during the Anglo-Zulu War, which took place in 1879. This film is unique for the time, as it does not shy away from the brutalities of war, showing all the events leading up to the epic battle and the battle itself in a brutal, realistic and gruesome manner. The directors for Zulu really took pride in their work and created a film which has high production quality even by today's standards, and a cast of highly talented actors, and a story which moves along at a rapid pace but is also coherent and easy to follow. At number 45, it is The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc, which tells the story of Saint Joan of Arc, the legendary French war heroine and religious martyr who inspired and led troops during the 100 Years' War. Mila Jovovich is an amazing actor and does a fantastic job in her role as Joan of Arc, and in my opinion she is probably the best actress to have ever portrayed the character. The battle scenes here are serviceable but definitely not excellent or of a high standard, and the plot is decent and easy to follow, which is really all you can expect from a film that's trying to cover so much ground. So this may not be the best medieval movie ever created, but it's definitely a film that more people need to get on their radar. At number 44, it is Furious, a Russian epic period film which covers the siege of Ryazan by the Mongols in 1237, and this film tells the actions of Russian knight Pateklavret, who led the heavily outnumbered Russian forces against the Mongol hordes of Batu Khan. This was the first Russian-based historical movie I had seen in a long time, and I really enjoyed it, as the plot was simple and easy to follow, if a little bit unoriginal, and the main character was fairly well developed and believable as well. Also, the movie did a great job of bringing the power of the Mongols to the screen in a really fantastic manner. Furious is a bit lacking in terms of cinematography and set pieces, but overall for a B-grade Russian film, I really enjoyed Furious, and I think all viewers of this channel will do so as well. At number 43 is Julius Caesar, a 2002 direct-to-TV movie about Julius Caesar's life, focusing on his battle against Vercingetorix, his rise to becoming dictator of Rome, and his eventual assassination. But if you're a fan of Roman history, then Julius Caesar is still a film that will appeal to you, as the acting is decent, the battle scenes are well done, and it's still probably one of the better direct-to-TV movies you will come across. At number 42, it is Henry VIII, a TV movie which focuses on the life of Henry VIII, one of the most controversial and popular figures in British history. And this film starts with Henry's deteriorating relationship with his first wife to his eventual death in 1547 and all the turbulent and trying events in between. This film stars Ray Winstone, Emily Blunt and Sean Bean, so the cast is pretty star-studded for a B-grade film, and the acting by the secondary cast is pretty exceptional here as well. Overall, if you have 3 hours to kill and would like to revisit the Tudor world, then Henry VIII may be a great recommendation for you. At number 41, it is Subedar, a 2023 South Indian film that depicts the life of Subedar Thanaji Malusare and the epic battle of Sinagad, in which 500 Marathi warriors try to conquer a fort defended by 5,000 soldiers of the Mughal Empire. However, though, I do have to warn you that this movie will be pretty confusing if you don't have at least a small understanding of King Shivaji and his efforts to start a Maratha empire within India. So a bit of research on Wikipedia beforehand might be useful before you watch the film, but overall, if you want a unique look at Indian history, then you will really enjoy Subedar, and is definitely one of the most underrated films of recent memory. At number 40, it is One Life, a biographical film which tells the story of British humanitarian Nicholas Winton and the extraordinary efforts he made to help rescue large groups of Jewish children from German-occupied Czechoslovakia. This film has amazing acting by Anthony Hopkins and Helena Bonham Carter, and they both do a fantastic job of bringing this little-known part of World War II to life. At number 39, it is Beowulf and Grendel, a 2005 historical fantasy adventure based around the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf. Beowulf and Grendel stars Gerard Butler and Stellan Skarsgård, and they both do a serviceable job within the film, but neither of them are very spectacular. But the storyline here is decent, and it does a good job of staying true to the events depicted within the poem, and the costume design and set pieces are decent as well for a low budget film. So if you can ignore the flaws such as no character development and some pointless subplots, then watching Beowulf and Grendel might be a great way to pass away a few hours. At number 38, it is El Cid, the 1961 classic epic historical film, which gives a largely fictionalized depiction of the Castilian warlord Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. El Cid is a classic film which gets a lot of things right, especially in terms of developing the storyline and throwing in lots of plot twists. The acting is great and the characters are believable and relatable as well. But if you're looking for a purely entertaining historical drama which focuses more on storyline and character development, then El Cid will be the perfect recommendation for you. At number 37, it is The Return, which is a retelling of the final part of the Odyssey in which Odysseus returns to Ithaca after 20 years away, and his beloved city is unrecognizable, and to make things even worse, there's a host of suitors trying to win the hand of his wife Penelope. And this film stars Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche as the two lead roles of the film, and they are both excellent and bring their characters to life splendidly. The plot here is also very entertaining and easy to follow, but perhaps not as cinematic as I would have liked. The third act of The Return is also a bit rushed, but if you're looking for a fun and engaging trip back to ancient Greece, then The Return is a great recommendation for you. At number 36, it is The Eagle, a historical film which tells the story of centurion Marcus Flavius Aquila, a Roman soldier who is determined to restore his family's honor after his father, who was one of the leaders of the 9th Legion, disappeared somewhere in the region of Britain, alongside with the eagle standard of his legion. This film stars Channing Tatum, and he's a bit lackluster in the film overall, but his co-star Jamie Bell is excellent as the slave Eska. The Eagle has a very interesting plot with a great first act in particular, some pretty decent pacing throughout, and some excellent set pieces and production design. However though, the second and third act of this film are not nearly as strong as the opening, but overall if you enjoy films that focus on Roman expansion within Britain, then you will definitely enjoy The Eagle. At number 35, it is Siege of Jadotville, which is a war film based around the events that led up to and occurred during the Siege of Jadotville, where a unit of Irish soldiers were besieged by Cantonese forces during the United Nations operation in the Congo during 1961. The Siege of Jadotville does a great job of bringing the viewer up to date with the political and socio-economic conditions during this time period and the events leading up to the siege. So if you're looking to find out more about a very little known part of African history, then Siege of Jadotville is my recommendation for you. At number 34, it is The Merchant of Venice, a film based on the Shakespearean play by the same name. And I have to start off by saying that The Merchant of Venice is a very complex and multi-layered play, which would be hard to portray on the big screen, but this film nails it pretty well. And a large part of that success is due to the amazing acting by Al Pacino, who portrays the role of Shylock, an angry Jewish moneylender, perfectly. There are multiple storylines being portrayed here, such as a romance being pursued at the cost of a huge loan, contracts and debts not being honored, and the tensions between Christians and Jews within the city of Venice. But this movie is not without flaws, such as Jeremy Irons and Joseph Fiennes not giving great performances in the film, and it takes a bit too much time to get used to Al Pacino's New York accent in the movie as well. But overall, these are minor critiques for what is overall an amazing Renaissance time period movie. At number 33 is Alterais, a 2006 epic historical film taking place in 17th century Spain, and it depicts a range of real life events and some real characters as well. I luckily was able to watch this film with English subs, and I enjoyed the movie immensely, but I would consider it just a good one-time watch. The costume design, battle scenes and acting were very good, but this film tries to encompass 5 novels in a 2-hour and 30-minute time frame, so the plot is very quick and confusing with lots of time jumps and new characters being added all the time, which makes the movie especially confusing for viewers like myself who may not be familiar with the adventures of Captain Alterais book series, which this movie is based on. But overall, Alterais is a unique and decent film with a fair number of flaws, but anything with Viggo Mortensen in it is worth at least a one-time watch. At number 32, it is Goben Giri, which tells the story of the disgraced samurai Kakunoshin Yanagata, who is exiled due to a false accusation and he is forced to live in poverty with his daughter Kinu. And the story follows the revenge mission he ensues on to clear his name and to repair his reputation. If you enjoy samurai movies, then you will love Goben Giri, as the storyline here is absolutely amazing, the acting is brilliant, and of course the sword fighting sequences are all top notch as well. At number 31, it is The Forgotten Battle, a World War II film which depicts the Battle of the Scheldt in 1944 through the viewpoint of 3 characters, a British pilot, a Dutch Axis soldier, and a resistance fighter. The Forgotten Battle benefits from strong acting by the entire cast, an engaging and harrowing plot with non-stop plot twists, and brutal battles and action sequences as well. The few minor critiques I have with this film though is the huge number of characters that get introduced in the film, making it hard to keep up with all the names and people within the movie. But overall, if you have a Netflix subscription, then you need to watch The Forgotten Battle, one of the most underrated World War II films of recent memory. At number 30, it is Defiance, a film which sees 4 Jewish brothers, the Bielskis, escape persecution by the Nazis by fleeing into the Niliboki forest. Eventually, they meet up with other refugees and Jewish escapees, and they become the leaders of the small rebel force and do their best to survive in some of the most harrowing and challenging situations. This film stars Daniel Craig, Liev Schreiber, and Jamie Bell in lead roles, and they all do a spectacular job of bringing their characters to life. The plot is also very engaging, and it really does show you just how difficult it is to maintain control of a group of people facing extreme situations, and it results in the realism being retained for the duration of the entire film. At number 29, it is a samurai movie called 11 Rebels, which is a samurai action film set during the 1868 Boshin War, as the era of the samurai is starting to come to an end. The story follows a group of 11 outcasts, criminals and samurais who are promised freedom if they can defend a fortress for the Shibata clan. But they eventually discover that they've been used as pawns in a larger political scheme, and everything backfires miserably. 11 Rebels has amazing, intense action sequences, excellent production design, and a talented ensemble cast. But the storyline here can be a bit confusing at times, and some of the plot devices don't really make sense. But overall, if you're looking for an over-the-top, action-filled samurai adventure, then check out 11 Rebels. At number 28, it is Valhalla Rising, a Scandinavian adventure set during the 11th century in which a fierce pagan warrior named One Eye escapes captivity and eventually joins forces with some crusaders trying to get to the Holy Lands. However, though, they end up in an unknown island where they have to fight for survival against a number of hidden and secret forces. This movie stars Mads Mikkelsen, and any period piece featuring him is worth a watch in my opinion. At number 27, it is A Man for All Seasons, a historical drama which depicts the life of Thomas More from 1529 to 1535. Thomas More is a chancellor and trusted advisor to King Henry VIII, and the primary focus of the movie is on presenting Thomas More's opposition to King Henry's divorce to Catherine of Aragon and his refusal to acknowledge King Henry as the supreme head of the Church of England. And this movie does a great job of engrossing you with its fascinating and well-paced plot and brilliant acting by Paul Scofield, alongside a very well-written script. The main criticism I have for A Man of All Seasons though is that a lot of the set pieces, costume design, and the production value just a little bit too low budget even by the standards of the 60s. However though, A Man for All Seasons is a movie I can happily recommend to any viewer of this channel. At number 26, it is the South Korean historical movie The Fortress, which tells the story of the Second Manchu invasion of Korea in 1636, resulting in King Inju and his retainers having to find refuge in a remote and poorly stocked fortress. The central story is based around the court politics and intrigue that ensues as each advisor tries to convince the king on the best way to deal with the invading Qin army. This is a unique movie as the emphasis here is more on court politics and the importance of words in a war rather than swords, resulting in majority of the film focusing on conversations between characters and analyzing the impact that the decisions of nobility has on the common folk. So if you're looking for a movie which focuses less on large battles and action sequences and more on the small intricacies behind war, then The Fortress is my recommendation for you. At number 25, it is Medieval, a film depicting the life of the legendary Hussite commander John Ziska, one of the most successful military leaders of all time, having never lost a battle in which he was the commander of his army. And this film tells the story of his rebellion against Henry III of Rosenborg. Medieval does a great job of bringing his story to life, and it has some decent acting by most of the cast, with Michael Caine and Ben Foster being the two standouts for me. There's a lot to like about Medieval, but it is a very rapid-paced film with a lot of events trying to be told in a very short time frame. But if you're looking for a movie which has a great central character using some really unique and extraordinary military strategies to defeat larger forces, then Medieval is the film for you. The 24th spot on this list goes to Panipat, an epic war film based on the events of the Third War of Panipat, where the Maratha forces face an invading Afghan force led by Ahmad Shah Abdali. The acting here is stellar, with Sanjay Dutt giving a fantastic performance as the antagonist in the film. There's a lot to like about Panipat, with the strong storyline filled with lots of plot twists and turns, as well as some excellent cinematography and battle scenes. As always, I'm not really a fan of the dance sequences and the constant interruption of songs throughout the movie, but you can forward all these without really losing anything from the plot. So if you're looking for an Indian medieval movie that you may have missed, epic historical drama that you may have missed, then Panipat is my recommendation for you. The 23rd spot on this list goes to The Northman, the newest and arguably the best mainstream Viking-based historical film ever released. The Northman is primarily a revenge tale, and it tells the story of Prince Amleth and his cunning plan to defeat his uncle who killed his father and forced Amleth to flee from his home when he was just a child. The Northman starts off as a grand spectacle and slowly turns into a snail-paced story about Prince Amleth slowly trying to break down his uncle's power and influence from the inside. The story and pacing are definitely the two weakest elements of the film, and The Northman drags on for far too long. But the stellar acting of Alexander Skarsgård and the cinematography and production quality of the film are definitely where this movie shines. At number 22, it is All Quiet on the Western Front, a Netflix original World War I movie which follows Paul Boehmer and his friends who naively join the German army as they have a romanticized version of war in their heads, and it is propaganda that the German government and army are just too happy to continue to fuel. But as the movie progresses, these young men lose their innocence as they experience the horrors and trauma of war and the physical and mental impact it has on them. This movie has amazing acting, a great story, and a fantastic sense of realism. And it really does show the Germans as more than just simple big baddies or an evil force. It's a group of individual soldiers who didn't know what they were getting themselves into and had no choice but to follow the commands of their generals. So if you love war movies, then All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix is the perfect film for you. The 21st spot on this list goes to Ran, the last epic samurai film created by the legendary director Akira Kurosawa, and tells the story of an elderly samurai warlord who has gathered considerable wealth and land over the years, and he realizes that his end is coming near, so he divides all his wealth into 3 equal parts, a third for each one of his sons. But this plan fails miserably and results in a huge civil war. And the story of Ran is very unique and interesting, and the film benefits from amazing acting by the entire cast. So yes, Ran is a film that does have a lot of talking, and the action scenes are not as regular as one would have expected. But if you stick with this film, you will definitely find an engaging and fun-filled samurai adventure. At number 20, it is Ironclad, a historical film based around the siege of Rochester Castle, in which a small group of rebels and noblemen during the First Barons' War try to hold Rochester Castle against King John and his forces. This film follows a generic B-grade formula, but what the film does get right is its battle scenes and siege tactics, which magnificently display how difficult it is for a small force to protect a fortress from invaders. But this is definitely not one of the best medieval films ever created, but it's still a good recommendation for me for anyone looking for an easy and simple story to watch set in the medieval time period. At number 19, it is Kesari, which tells the incredible story of the last stand of 21 brave Sikhs fighting against 10,000 Afghan tribesmen in 1897. Kesari highlights everything audiences would want in an epic historical film, such as realistic production design, interesting characters, and some huge epic battle scenes as well. But if you want an epic historical film of one of the most daring and successful last stands in fairly modern history, then Kesari is my recommendation for you. At number 19, it is William Tell, a medieval historical epic set in 14th century Switzerland during the brutal occupation by the Austrian Habsburgs. And this film depicts the legendary story of William Tell, the expert marksman and reluctant hero who stands up against tyranny after his family and homeland are threatened. Claes Bang stars as Tell, delivering a very believable performance as William Tell, and this movie benefits from gritty battle sequences, breathtaking Swiss landscapes, and authentic costume design as well. This historical film has very uneven pacing though, and the plot is pretty unoriginal and doesn't really bring anything new to the genre. But overall, if you're looking for a film that has a relatively decent commitment to historical realism and does a good job of portraying the story of one of Switzerland's most legendary figures, then William Tell is the perfect film for you. At number 18, it is The Fall of the Roman Empire, the classic 1964 sword and sandal film, which looked at the corruption and politics present within the Roman Empire during the reign of Commodus and how these events started the decline of the Roman Empire itself. Although this film was a huge box office bomb, it still garnered positive feedback from critics as the plot and story for the movie were great. And this film highlights what makes the classic era of historical movies so endearing even to this day, as the movie relies solely on amazing acting by the entire cast and a strong plot to carry the movie forward, as there is no CGI or over-the-top action sequences in this film at all that would distract viewers from weaker elements of the movie. But nearly 40 years later, there's a reason that The Fall of the Roman Empire is still remembered as one of the best historical movies ever created, and you owe it to yourself to find out why that is. At number 17, it's Ashoka, a 2001 Indian historical epic that depicts the life of Emperor Ashoka, one of the most important and controversial rulers in Indian history. And the film stars Shah Rukh Khan in the lead role, and it takes place during the 3rd century BC. Ashoka benefits from amazing acting, magnificent large-scale battle scenes, and elaborate set designs. But the movie does really take some strong creative liberties with the history, even by Bollywood standards. And the pacing of the second half of the film is very uneven as the movie transitions into a story that is of a more philosophical nature. But Ashoka is an engaging and fascinating historical film about an ancient Indian king that most Western audiences wouldn't be familiar with, and I think most viewers of this channel will enjoy the movie as well. At number 15, we have the Netflix original film The King, which focuses on the life of King Henry V, who was the King of England during the early 1400s, and he was widely renowned throughout history for his small contingency of English archers and knights, and their victory over a much larger and better equipped French army at Agincourt. And like most productions from Netflix, this is a high budget, high quality film with fantastic acting by the entire cast, most notable being the quirky performance by Robert Pattinson, which you will either love or hate. So if you would like to see a historical movie which brings the brutal reality of medieval warfare to life perfectly, then The King is my recommendation for you. At number 14, it is The Mission, an epic historical movie focusing on a very unique premise, which is the story of the first Jesuit mission station in the tribal jungles of Brazil, developed in the 18th century. And this movie displays the lengths that the priests and local native tribes will go to protect their land and the mission station when it gets stuck in the middle of a politically unstable situation. The Mission stars Robert De Niro, Liam Neeson, and Jeremy Irons, and they are spectacular in this film. Even the secondary cast are great here, and the life of the native tribes in Brazil during the 18th century is very well established and depicted. My primary critique of The Mission is with the lackluster final battle, which the entire movie was building towards, and it just didn't deliver as well as it should have. But if you're looking for an epic historical movie that is different from most other historical films, then The Mission is my recommendation for you. At number 13, it is Tristan and Isolde, an epic drama based around the medieval romantic legend of Tristan and Isolde. The primary plot of this movie is based around one of the members of the English royal family falling in love with the princess from the Irish royal family, and both of these families are bitter rivals and sworn enemies for many generations now. Tristan and Isolde is a great film produced by the legendary director Ridley Scott, and it stars James Franco, Sophia Myles, and Henry Cavill in leading roles throughout the film. The storyline though does leave a bit to be desired, but overall, Tristan and Isolde is a fairly decent medieval film that rarely ever gets mentioned or talked about. At number 12, it is Black Death, a film that does a good job of mixing two different genres, horror and history together, and with the focus being on the breakout of the bubonic plague, it is a historical topic which can indeed be utilized effectively in a horror and supernatural backdrop as well. This film has an interesting but not very original plot, and Sean Bean and Eddie Redmayne do a good job of carrying the film, which needed the strong acting to cover the various plot holes and missteps of the movie. And even though it may not be a revolutionary film, it is still a highly engaging and enjoyable watch nonetheless. Now, number 11 is the Netflix original movie The Outlaw King, which depicts the struggle and sacrifices Robert the Bruce had to endure to win back the Scottish crown from England. And this movie focuses on the outlaw period of Robert the Bruce's life, from 1304 to 1307, when he was rebelling against the English forces in Scotland, who far outnumbered his own small tribe of supporters. And one of the best elements of The Outlaw King is how the producer was able to highlight to audiences just how difficult it is for a small-scale rebellion to grow into a revolution which will change the entire historical outlook of a country. The Outlaw King is fairly historically accurate, perfectly acted, and has an engaging and heartbreaking storyline, making it a thrilling watch for any fan of historical films, and historical movies in general. At number 10, it is The Physician, a movie focusing on an orphan boy named Rob and his determination to study medicine and prevent others from dying of easily treatable diseases in 1st century England, and this search for medical answers will eventually lead him to Persia. This movie is unique as it brings to life a topic very rarely discussed in movies or TV shows, and that is the way medical treatments and surgeries were performed during the medieval time period. So if you're looking for a movie that is well acted, perfectly paced, and brings a unique spin to historical dramas, then The Physician is my recommendation for you. At number 9, it is 13 Assassins, a movie which takes place in 1844 near the end of the Edo period, in which a group of 13 assassins, 12 samurais, and a hunter hatch a secret plan to assassinate a very corrupt and evil local lord. If you love historical movies with lots of combat and action scenes, then The 13 Assassins is the movie for you, as this movie has great battle scenes, an interesting plot, and some fantastic set pieces and world building. The acting though is not the best and some plot devices are a bit cliche, but 13 Assassins is a great movie for anyone who loves samurai and lots of over-the-top combat. And the 8th spot on this list goes to Downfall, which explores the final days of Adolf Hitler's life stuck in his Berlin bunker. And this film is told through the viewpoint of Gertrude Traudl-Jung, the primary secretary for Adolf Hitler during this time period. Downfall shines for its ability to bring something new to the story of Hitler and his last days that audiences would most likely not have seen before, as we see firsthand the deteriorating state of Hitler's mind and everything he held so dear crumbling around him. Downfall is definitely a movie that I would encourage any fan of historical war movies to add to their watch list as soon as possible, as it is probably the most unique and underrated World War II movie I have ever seen. At number 7, it is Sardar Udham, which follows a primary character named Udham Singh, a Sikh revolutionary who spends over 20 years planning and orchestrating the assassination of Michael O'Dowd, the man responsible for a Jallianwala Bagh massacre in which thousands of peaceful Indian protesters were horrifically massacred by British forces. And much of the praise around this film is based around the acting of the main cast, but also in the way the director has been able to reproduce the political and socio-economic climate of the time. So if you're looking to explore a little talked about massacre in Indian history and get a better understanding of the relationship between the British Empire and India, then Sardar Udham is the perfect film for you. The 6th spot on this list goes to Mongol, a biographical movie that came out in 2007, and it depicts the story of Genghis Khan from his childhood to his rise to becoming the warlord that finally unites all of Mongolia under his control. And this movie does a great job of slowly building the story of Genghis Khan and his family, and it spends a surprisingly long amount of time delving into his troubled childhood and the huge number of obstacles and struggles he would have to endure before even becoming a minor warlord in Mongolia. The third act of this film though is very rushed and it depicts Temujin's rise to power far too quickly, but other than this critique, Mongol is one of the best movies that you probably haven't seen yet. At number 5, it is The Promised Land, a Danish historical drama which tells the story of Ludwig Khaled, who heads into the uninhabitable land of Jutland during the 1700s to start a new life and create a future filled with riches, glory, and honor for himself. And with a plot that is both fascinating and well-paced, you will find yourself engrossed in this historical epic in a way that only the best of films can truly engage you. The 4th spot on this list goes to Admiral Roaring Currents, a South Korean epic war film which focuses on the famous Battle of Myeongbyong, which sees General Yi Sun-sin fighting against a Japanese Navy fleet numbering over 330 ships with his own small force of only 13 ships. The Admiral Roaring Currents does a fantastic job of building General Yi's character as a reliable, experienced and fearless commander who is the last hope of the Joseon Empire. Admiral Roaring Currents is a perfect viewing experience for anyone looking for an epic historical adventure reminiscent of 300 on the Sea. The 3rd spot on this list goes to Red Cliff, the 288-minute complete version, not the 148 condensed movie that is also available as well. And Red Cliff utilizes a slower paced story to effectively develop the characters of the film, while also giving viewers a chance to witness the societal and political impact of the Three Kingdoms War on the common folk as well. There are also some amazing battle scenes which will keep the viewers on the edge of their seats, with some very outstanding and unique military tactics being displayed. Obviously, with a film of this magnitude, there are going to be some issues, such as there being too many names and characters for a viewer unfamiliar with the history of the Three Kingdom time period to keep up with. But this is a small critique for a film that is this well produced, so if you're looking for a movie about ancient China, then Red Cliff is my top recommendation for you. And number 2, we have Agora, a historical drama which follows the life of Hypatia, an Alexandrian mathematician, philosopher and astronomer from her childhood to her eventual death. Agora does a fantastic job of highlighting how difficult it was to advance science in the astronomies of the time and the growing influence of external forces in Alexandria. Rachel Weisz really shines in her role of Hypatia and does a fantastic job of bringing the character to life. But there are a few issues with pacing, and the political situation of the time could have been expanded upon a bit more in my opinion. But if you're looking for a truly epic historical film that shows a mix of Roman, Christian and scientific influences on ancient Alexandria, then Agora is my recommendation for you. And the top spot on this list goes to Arn the Knight Templar, which is a fictional story based on a Knights Templar named Arn if you couldn't decipher the clues from the movie's title. And this movie sees a fictional character named Arn become a Knights Templar and he eventually becomes a witness or a catalyst to many real historical events such as the Battle of Montgizzard and the Battle of Hattin. Arn the Knight Templar is also one of the most expensive films ever created in the history of Swedish cinema, and it is a fantastic feat of storytelling, cinematography and bringing a semi-accurate historical depiction of the Crusades to our screen. So it's definitely a strong recommendation from me, and in my opinion, the most underrated and unknown historical film ever created. So let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this list and if there are any other great historical movies that are not very popular that I may have missed out on. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with everything to do with historical movies and historical TV shows, then subscribe to my channel, History Spark. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.